Another jobs report stuns with impressive job additions, a banner victory for the Biden administration? Yet, if we take a closer look, the ground beneath these numbers seems a little shakier. The 256,000 jobs added to payrolls in December might sound like a triumph, at least on paper, but is this jobs growth really telling the whole story of the wider U.S. economy? In this episode, let's unravel the various economic signals hiding behind these glossy job numbers. We'll analyze Trump's predicament as he sets to take office in just over a week, inheriting, at least on the surface, an economy on solid footing, yet economic hazards lurk in the shadows, inflation that continues to rage like an unruly fire, mortgage rates that zoom past expectations, and federal funds rates that are stuck in the stratosphere. But first things first, any economist worth their salt knows what these numbers really mean. You can't just cheer over a high jobs number when so much of the economy is being torn apart by inflation and strangled by high interest rates. So, if you're working in finance, or just a curious individual trying to make sense of it all, buckle up, we're diving deep into this. Let's start with Biden's remarkable turnaround for an economy rattled by the pandemic. His administration presided over solid job creation, record low unemployment levels, and even some wage growth. Yet, inflation hung around stubbornly, threatening to erode any economic gains for working families. What looks like a victory on paper actually belies the realities families face weekly at checkout counters across the nation. Take a traditional economic indicator like real wages. The headline numbers might suggest that wages are increasing, but after adjusting for inflation, the story is different. Real wages for many Americans actually declined during Biden's tenure, something that doesn't sit well with voters. In the November midterm elections, Biden's Democrats faced a harsh reality check, with voters giving Donald Trump a clear path to his return to the White House. Why such a polarized reality? Economic growth clearly benefited large financial institutions and investors, as corporate earnings surged. Stock markets rebounded from pandemic lows, and even mega-cap tech firms like Apple and Microsoft reached new heights. Yet for average consumers, prices outpaced wage growth. Goods like groceries, gasoline, and rent became increasingly unaffordable, leaving many voters disillusioned by claims of economic recovery. The problem is inflation. Though the pandemic supply chain disruptions began to ease in 2022, inflation remained elevated, with year-over-year CPI increases hovering around 3.5 to 4%. The Federal Reserve tried cooling it down by raising interest rates aggressively, but this created a nasty side effect. Jobs were added, yet businesses started cutting back on investments, with consumer-driven sectors getting walloped. A prime example, in December 2024, core inflation, excluding volatile food and energy prices, remained persistently high, hovering at 3.8%, well above the Fed's target of 2%. This force-fed inflation led to distrust in Biden's economic policy achievements. For many Americans, their weekly grocery bills were a persistent reminder that whatever job growth or wage improvements the government touted, their dollar didn't go as far as it used to. This disconnect between the administration's messaging and the on-the-ground reality of voters shifted the political winds, bringing Donald Trump back into prominence, and turning inflation into one of the most toxic issues of Biden's presidency. Trump faces an unusual dilemma as he prepares to take office on relatively solid ground yet with inflationary pressure undermining that strength. The U.S. economy looks like it's faring well based on job creation, but when inflation never quite goes away, it becomes a ticking time bomb. It doesn't get much better with core PCE inflation, personal consumption expenditures, the Fed's preferred measure, still sitting at 3.5% in December 2024. Already, Trump has acknowledged that lowering prices may be harder than he initially thought. During the campaign, he boasted that once in office, price levels would go way down, but more recent statements reveal he's bracing for the tough road ahead. The Federal Reserve, trapped in this quagmire, has taken a wait-and-see approach. Their internal minutes suggest they may hold off on future rate cuts for the foreseeable future, shifting their earlier positions and stalling hopes of relief from skyrocketing mortgage and loan rates. Look at mortgage rates. One of the starkest outcomes of the Fed's aggressive rate hikes is that 30-year mortgage rates have shot up close to 7%, the highest in decades. This has had enormous consequences for housing affordability. First-time homebuyers are being priced out of the market, with monthly mortgage payments ballooning by 30% compared to just 2 years ago. According to Freddie Mac, the median home price in the U.S. surpassed $406,000 in late 2024, pricing many potential homeowners out of the market entirely. What does this mean? High mortgage rates are choking people out of the housing market and distorting general consumption patterns. When monthly housing costs eat up disposable income, there's less left for spending elsewhere in the economy, further gutting local small businesses and suppressing consumer-driven economic growth, making Trump's goal of getting prices way down seem like a distant dream. For many, Trump's promise to ease mortgage rates will set him on a delicate path. The Fed doesn't have much room to maneuver while inflation remains high, making any premature rate cuts a risky gamble that could stoke inflation further, triggering a backlash from investors and Fed hawks critically watching whatever his administration tries next. Trump's economic agenda historically centered around tariffs, and one critical part of his re-emergence has been his continued stance on America First trade policies. Strikingly, it's far from clear whether his trade policies worked during his first term, and the global economic environment he's stepping into doesn't look much more favorable. Back during his first term, Trump launched trade wars, notably with China, slapping tariffs on hundreds of billions worth of goods. The result was shaky. U.S. consumers bore much of the increased cost burden, though many manufacturing jobs did return to the U.S. Now, renewed tensions appear on the horizon. Trump has flirted with the idea of imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, a move that looks, let's be honest, like economic self-sabotage. If tariffs are reintroduced, they will likely drive up costs for US-based manufacturers, many of whom rely on imported components, which in turn pushes inflation up again. Think of auto manufacturing where US factories depend on cheap Canadian aluminum and steel, raise tariffs, and production costs skyrocket. Already, consumer sentiment is showing cracks in anticipation of what a new tariff regime might look like. The University of Michigan's reading of consumer sentiment showed a drop in expectations for inflation over the next 5 to 10 years, up to 3.4%. Combine this with widespread fears of rising unemployment in 2025, and it's clear that renewed trade tensions could easily hurt, not help, the ordinary Americans Trump vowed to uplift. Shifting gears toward foreign policy, let's not forget foreign policy decisions have sizable economic ramifications. Trump's upcoming policy decisions look monumentally risky. He talked about annexing Canada as the 51st U.S. state. Is this a joke? Unfortunately, with Trump, we're never entirely sure. More concerning to markets, though, is his willingness to upend long-standing ties with key U.S. trading allies and shake up established defense agreements like NATO. Nowhere is this clearer than in Trump's rhetoric toward the Panama Canal or the Middle East. Both avenues could have drastic consequences for supply chains and global trade routes. His dire warnings about NATO allies not spending enough on defense risk roiling transatlantic partnerships that underpin not just peace, but economic security. Markets react not just to cold, hard economic indicators but also geopolitical tension, and Trump's willingness to burn bridges certainly heightens the prospects of market volatility. Add to that the precarious situation in Ukraine and Russia, with Trump eyeing potential peace negotiations. If Trump cozies up to Putin, again, what could that say about American economic interests in the region? New negotiations could cause severe geopolitical realignments, pushing global capital flows, sparking renewed OPEC-driven oil price shocks, and twisting an already delicate balance in the global commodities market. One of the items facing Trump almost immediately is leadership at the Federal Reserve. Jerome Powell's seat has become a hot potato, and rumors suggest that multiple names are floating around as possible replacements. Names like Larry Lindsey, Kevin Hassett, and David Malpass could easily reshape U.S. economic policies in an extremely unorthodox manner. Expect turmoil to come when he sets the stage for a new central banking approach. Trump is no fan of Powell's hawkish tendencies, and if Trump elects new members to the Fed favoring looser monetary policy, we could see widespread shifts in markets, causing prices to jump while simultaneously reversing whatever progress the Fed has made in taming inflation. The central bank's independence remains a cornerstone of the U.S. financial system, but turbulent appointments or erratic fiscal stances leave investors nervous, another reason U.S. equities may see volatility under Trump's presidency. So, what's the takeaway? Trump inherits an economy that seems to be on decent footing, but dig even slightly below the surface, and economic fault lines present challenges that may derail any easy claims of recovery. Persistent inflation, rocketing mortgage rates, looming tariffs, and just pure political risk make it challenging for the United States to grow unencumbered. What's abundantly clear is that Trump will have to navigate a treacherous path, balancing consumer expectations, investor demands, the Fed's caution, and his trade-warring preferences. How Trump manages these economic landmines will determine not only the short-term future of the U.S. economy but how voters perceive his second stint in office. But folks, buckle up, it's bound to be a bumpy ride.